right, we're going to call our public hearing to order. Item B, declaration of a quorum, 6 members present, 1 absent. Welcome, everybody. That brings us to item C, public hearing. Receive presentation related to the CSISD Texas Academic Performance Report taper for 2021-22 school year. Mr. Martindale.
Thank you, Mr. Horak and board members. TEA requires that all districts hold a public hearing to review their taper within 90 days of receipt of the report. Here to do that for us on behalf of CSISD is our Chief Administrative Officer and Deputy Superintendent, Dr. Molly Perry. Dr. Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Martindale, Mr. Horak, members of the board. This evening, I will provide an overview of the 2021-22 Texas Academic Performance Report, or TAPER. This is a 32-page report, and so we will be hitting the highlights this evening. But as a reminder, this annual report that we receive from the Texas Education Agency does include information that encompasses not only academic performance, but also some financials as well as demographic information regarding our staff, our programs, and our students. Within that report, you will see a lot of information as it relates to the State of Texas Academic or Assessment of Academic Readiness, or STAR, as well as other components such as attendance rates, dropout and graduate information, lots of information on college readiness, which we'll really highlight this evening for you all. And then within the district profile, you'll find that information on students and their demographics, as well as our staff and our programs. In addition to what you find in that 32-page report, we are required under state statute to add some additional components to that report. And so we will be adding all of that and compiling it and placing it on our website shortly. And so the first thing that we are required to includes our PEIMS financial standard reports. And so because it is in arrears, we would be looking at that 2021 actual report. We also include our accreditation status as a district, those campus performance objectives, which can also be found within our campus improvement plans, the determination status as it relates to special education, a report of any violent or criminal incidents that might occur on school property, performance of our students in post-secondary institutions, specifically within Texas, and then finally that progress towards meeting HB3 or House Bill 3 goals, which is a new requirement of the TAPER compiled report. So as I mentioned, the first piece of TAPER is really centered around STAR results, but also participation. Secondly, we would be looking at the post-secondary readiness. Again, those are going to be things like graduation rates, dropout rates, college, career, and military readiness, performance on college entry exams, as well as advanced courses such as AP and dual credit in high school. The next piece would be the staff and student demographics, and then ultimately we do have this requirement to publicly share the results through not only the public hearing this evening, but also on the website. So you all did receive a fairly comprehensive report of our STAR performance in 2022 back in August. Those were preliminary scores, and so there is just some slight variance here and there, nothing of major significance, but that is because the reports and how they relate to accountability and inclusion of some students and exclusion of other students. Because, for example, if a student is not here on snapshot day, they're not then included in the accountability subset. Same thing once we get to EOC. If a student has retaken the test, they would count here, but not necessarily for accountability purposes. And so there are some, again, very slight variances. And so you can see here we've got district versus state performance in reading grades 3 through 8, with the blue representing the state percentage of students who hit the approaches or passes standard on STAR relative to College Station ISD. And so across the board in each of those grade levels in the area of reading, our students did exceed the state rate of approaches. The same trend holds true in mathematics. Always like to remind folks that in 7th grade we do see a little bit of an anomaly because the accelerated math program resulting in such a large percentage of our students not taking that on-level exam because they were actually enrolled in either the 8th grade course or even Algebra 1 by that level. Similar trends in both science and social studies, with us seeing some good gains, in particular this year with social studies. You can see, although we're at 76%, that is significantly higher than that state rate of 61. And lastly, in terms of a STAR performance review, we've got our 5 required end-of-course exams with CSISD performance, again, exceeding the state in all tested grade levels and subjects. So some highlights from the testing. Again, our students do continue to perform at higher rates than their peers, not only across every subject, but every grade level in EOC, but also with those higher rates, like the approaches, meets, and even the master's level. We did see, just in terms of trends, as a reminder, in reading and social studies, that our scores were actually higher than prior to the pandemic, and we are continuing to see that outperformance. We have seen, much like others around not only the state but the nation, some performance declines in mathematics post-COVID and science, but we do still see that performance improving, and now Dr. Hickman will provide a more comprehensive report on that later this evening. So let's talk a little bit about post-secondary readiness. We've continued to see a slight uptick every year over recent history in the number of students who are graduating from College Station ISD. You'll notice here the class of 2021 is who is reported, and again, we do have some of the data in arrears from the school year prior due to the reporting timelines. We actually continue some cleanup on graduate information into the subsequent school year, and so you'll see that hearkening back to 21. Our 4-year graduation rate continues to exceed that of the state, with 94.7% of our students graduating in 4 years relative to that state rate of 90%. Conversely, our dropout rate is lower than the state rate, with 3.1% of students not completing. Then college, career, military readiness, or CCMR, that is an area where we've continued to see some good gains. We, along with the state rates, saw a bit of a setback during COVID, partially because some of the things that students were doing to obtain CCMR were not available when testing was not happening for things like SAT, ACT, but also just as students got back on track with things. And so we are seeing that trend coming back up, and we're monitoring that more closely than ever. A few other areas related to post-secondary readiness. First, we've got advanced or dual credit completion. And you might think initially that 39% looks a little bit low, but that is not any locally designated advanced course. There's very specific courses that are defined by the state as advanced. For example, all of our AP courses would be included in that list. And so we do not have as many students taking dual credit because, as you'll see on the next graphic to the right, we do have a very high rate of students who are taking AP courses. In fact, almost twice as many as the state rate are graduating as AP grads, meaning that they have not only taken and completed a course, but met that criteria of at least 3 or higher on an AP exam. Again, our students are performing at levels that would indicate college readiness at significantly higher rates than their peers around the state, with just about 10 percentage points higher than their peers. The way that a student would be considered to be college ready is a subset of the college, career, and military readiness, really focusing in on more of the academics, such as TSI, dual credit completion, SAT or ACT performance. Then lastly, our TSI criteria grads are really specifically looking at the TSIA exam or SAT or ACT, and students have to meet criteria in both English and in math in order to be considered a TSI criteria graduate. So again, much higher than that state rate of just over 40% at 55.8% of the class of 2021. We always love to spotlight our advanced placement. This is, I believe, the 7th year now that College Station ISD has earned the distinction of being on the National AP Honor Roll, not only for our high levels of participation, but also our excellent performance in advanced placement. And so You can see there that over a third of our juniors and seniors participated in an exam, not just took the course, but actually took that exam, which is significantly greater than that state rate of just over 21%. This year, the highest rate of participation was in social studies. We see a little jockeying back and forth with the highest rate there, but social studies is pulled ahead for 2021. And those students are doing exceptionally well with over 80% meeting the criteria across subjects relative to a little over 48% at the state level. So let's talk a little bit about SAT and ACT. As you may have heard, many colleges are no longer requiring SAT or ACT for admission and entry, and I suspect that that might be why we're seeing a bit of a decline in our participation rates here in College Station ISD. Now, that doesn't mean that colleges don't look at those scores, and certainly doesn't mean that they don't consider them. They just don't necessarily all require them, and so we have seen that go down a little bit. But you'll also notice at the state level that higher rate of 70% is likely due to many high schools requiring their students to take these exams, whereas they're optional for our students in College Station ISD. So despite that, the students who are taking the exams are scoring at or above the criterion at more than twice the rate of their peers across the state. And those scores continue to outpace that average state score as well, both on the SAT. You can see there 1163 was our average, and then ACT was 25 relative to an average across the state of 20. So even though we've had a little bit of a decline in the participation, the scores remain very, very good relative to their peers. So let's talk demographics. So based on our October 21 snapshot, we had 14,138 students enrolled in College Station ISD with an attendance rate of 95.6% throughout the year. You can see the breakdown of our demographics with students by ethnicity. The largest portion continues to be made up of white, although over the years we've seen that number decline slightly, and then we've seen a slight growth within both Hispanic and then African American. And so that is what our student population looks like by ethnicity. And within that student population, we have a lot of different needs. The percentage of students who are economically disadvantaged, you can see is listed there. It actually did tick up to just about 40% previously. We suspect that some of the requirements associated with reporting being tied to free and reduced lunch status may have had some impact there. And so we'll see if that goes back up for this particular school year. Some of the other programs you can see listed there are percentages of bilingual ESL at risk. Special education does continue to increase, as we've reported to you all previously, as does 504 and dyslexia. And then just under 11% of our students were identified for gifted and talented. Yes, Mr. Decker.
I'm sorry if I missed it. With at risk, what was?
At risk?
Yeah. What was the definition of those kind of students?
I'm sorry.
What would mean an at-risk student?
Oh, I'm sorry. So there are a number of criteria that would define a student to be at risk under the state standards. And so that could be anything from a student's performance on early reading exams to being homeless to perhaps being in a situation where they've been placed in foster care. And so I believe there's 13. I'll look at, yeah. That would indicate the need to identify that student as being at risk of potentially not graduating within the 4-year time frame. But students are identified all the way down to kindergarten, depending on those criteria. Yes. All right, so moving on to staff demographics. In the 21-22 school year, we had 1,963 staff, with, of course, the largest percentage of those being made up of teachers, over half. The next being auxiliary, so that's going to encompass things like child nutrition, transportation, grounds workers, the folks that are supporting the operations of our facilities. Next, you see educational aides makes up 14%. Professional support next, and then of course the smallest percentage at 8 being central administration. Looking more closely at our teachers, you can see here the makeup of those teachers by years of experience in the graphic on the left indicates that we are very balanced in terms of having teachers who have a lot of experience over 20 years, all the way down to those early years of beginning to 5 years. And so it's very proportional. And in the past, we've actually seen that be a little more skewed towards the higher levels of experience. I think we've seen not only in education, but in a number of different fields, the retirement rates have started to accelerate. And so you've got newer, younger folks entering the profession, and we've not been immune to that, of course, either. But of those, just a little under a third do hold an advanced degree, which is a greater percentage than what we see at that state average. Our average years of experience also does exceed the state, with our average teacher having 12 and a half years. We hear a lot about teacher turnover these days, probably more than ever. And we have historically always been under that state rate, despite being a relatively transient community with folks coming in and out for university-related needs. Although we have seen a little bit of an uptick over the last couple of years in terms of that percentage, it's certainly not been as great as that state level. And with that, just as a reminder, the full results will be available online with that compiled report. And that brings us to public comment.
Question, I think it was the COVID, you mentioned the COVID anomaly with CCMR, and that maybe it, but didn't we also have an issue with capturing some of that data? Did I recall that we had an issue, maybe that, I can't remember if it was the military, but it seemed like we had a...
So there has been statewide issues in capturing the data associated with military enlistment. When that initially was added into the system as a component of CCMR for the purposes of accountability, it was self-reported. And the state noticed that there were certain districts, not College Station ISD, that reported very high rates of military enlistment. And so they then pulled that, at least temporarily, from the equation. And now they've actually been working, they being the Texas Education Agency, with federal officials trying to gain that data. It does not appear that they've been successful in those efforts. And so TEA has adjusted how we are expected to report that with supplementary documentation available. And so we do see that coming back. In terms of reporting, the main issue for us during COVID was really students' access to take exams, whether it be related to CTE pathways for licensures or SAT, ACT, TSI during a time period.
And then, and you may not know, do you know what percentage of high schools require the SAT testing?
I do not offhand, but I know anecdotally many do require students to take one or the other.
Dr. Perry, on any of the STAR comparison bar charts, I'm trying to figure out which one were, when people were impacted by COVID. It's like fifth graders, were they impacted by COVID when they were in third grade?
So it's been 3 years ago since we did not have a STAR exam administered. So there was in the 2020 spring, a year of no testing. And so really it's going to be that 21 year where we first really start to see, although in that particular year, statewide and even here in College Station ISD, we still had a number of students who were participating virtually in their education and didn't necessarily test. And so really until 22, we didn't have a good look at our total population and performance on those exams.
But you said we've reached higher than pre-pandemic, like us versus us.
Yes.
Our result, and then our MAPS data gives us a better picture of that,
Yes.
right?
It gives us a much more real-time and comprehensive picture of not only where our students are achieving nationally relative to their peers, but also the growth that they are experiencing from administration to administration or year over year.
And so, and MAPS and STAR are not the same thing.
They are not. They are
And
not.
how many districts do MAPS? Are we in the minority of it, or is it?
I would say it is a growing majority of districts around the state that we are seeing have adopted MAP in order to gain more real-time, comprehensive information about their students. it has gained a lot of popularity over the last several years.
And I think either way, it's very indicative of the quality of education that we can't tell on that performance who is impacted where by COVID. The teachers have done a great job, the administration getting right back up.
I just think it's a great comprehensive summary of our district. I mean, I love the data, but it's great for the community and other folks to see as well, not just some of the demographic data, but then also the impressive performance data. We're almost everywhere where you compare us to the state. We are exceeding, and so very nice to see. So
Yes.
thank you. I hope it's easily accessible on the website for people
Absolutely.
to look at it. We should be proud of it.
I liked getting this report on the same night as the facilities report. That's kind of cool, having both those on the same night, seeing the big picture of everything. I do have a question. I'm just looking for a simple yes or no answer. Do private schools have to give this report?
No.
Do charter schools have to give this report?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else? Thank you for your report.
Thank you.
That brings us to item D, public comment. No comment. That will adjourn us. We will see y'all in less than 10 minutes.